Hi everyone, I want to go ahead and do a part 2 because I have a lot more that I want to talk about, because this all relates to the head of the corner. It's all connected with that, and I'll just show you this article over here on the topaz that I just happened to pull up, and you see that it's mentioned here. The topaz is mentioned in Ezekiel 28 verse 13. This is where it's talking about Lucifer's ephod. It's interesting that it comes up in verse 13 on that one, but I've talked about how the number 28 represents the year 2018, just like 118 represents the year 2018. That's just another way to say 118. It's also a condensed version of the year 2018. And then over here it's talking about the high priest's breastplate, and that comes up in Exodus 28. So this is in contrast to Lucifer's breastplate, and you see that the topaz comes up in verse 17 in Exodus 28, and as I mentioned before, it comes up in Job 28 verse 19. And I had done some videos about the head of the corner and the Great Pyramid of Giza, and I talked about my Cheops table, which I guess I'll go ahead and pull that up just to show it to you again. Okay, I've done a few videos about this, about the head of the corner, and so I'll try to find those videos and put a link in the description box. This is just one that I pulled up from the video file. This one was called, I'll go ahead and lift this up so you can see the name of it, but this is from the file. This is 2728 code and the Great Pyramid of Giza. Will Eternity Begin 2018 part 2. So this is just one of the videos that I did on the head of the corner, but as you can see, it was on the word Cheops, which is another name for the Great Pyramid of Giza, and then I had put in light, ray, DNA, arc, twist and turn, because it's all about DNA, but the important words here are Cheops and light, ray, and DNA. And so you see the word light coming up here in the lavender, and you see the word Cheops over here in the pinkish color, the reddish pink, and then the word ray. And the reason I had done a table on this is because they had shined a light ray into the Great Pyramid of Giza to find a hidden chamber, and so when I put those three words in, it formed what looks like a pyramid, and at the very tip of the pyramid you have the precious onyx, and that confirms from scripture that that is the head of the corner. Okay, and like I said, I've already explained all of this in previous videos, so I can't go through all of this information again, but over here I'm explaining how this all began with the Garden of Eden and the River of Life, which represents DNA, and how it branched off into 4 heads, and the very first one was the River Pison, which is where you had gold and bdellium and the onyx stone. Okay, and I had talked about how the Strong's number for the word onyx is 7718, which again seems to represent this year, which I believe we're still currently in according to God's calendar, because God's calendar begins in the spring. But I've also shown how this is truly the year 2018, and it's the same with the Hebrew calendar. They're also a year off, and since the years don't begin until the spring, this is technically still the Hebrew year 777. Okay, and then the next place you have the onyx stone mentioned is in Exodus 28, which I just talked about earlier, where it also talks about the topaz, but over here you see it mentioned in verse 9. Okay, so I had talked about how God confirms the onyx as being the head of the corner in Exodus 28, because on the breastplate of the high priest you had the precious onyx, which was, you had 2 onyx stones on the shoulders of the high priest. This is all connected with a chain representing DNA, and then you have an onyx over here at the bottom, and so together this makes a triangle or a pyramid, and this is the the tribe of Joseph. Over here, Joseph represents Christ, so it's showing the head of the corner being represented by Jesus over here with the formation of a triangle. Okay, and this is consistent with the precious onyx being at the head of the corner in this table on the word Cheops, which is another name for the Great Pyramid of Giza. And so you see the precious onyx at the head of the corner of the triangle that's formed over here with the words light, Cheops, and Re, which is how they found the hidden chamber. And like I said, this is all about DNA, which is crystalline. You see the word crystal right here, and crystals are formed into the shape of a pyramid. So this is ultimately all about DNA and light, and Jesus being the true light and the way, the true, and the life. So this is all about Jesus, and it's all about DNA ultimately, because DNA is where all life comes from. And so what I want to do is try to tie this into my last video, because as I said, Jesus is the head of the corner, as it talks about in Luke 20:18. You also see wormwood mentioned here in Revelation 8:11. And so I'm just playing my last video. I'm trying to get to the table. So as you can see, this is a table that I did on the word Nibiru. It originally came up straight up and down. I'll try to show you how it came up originally, but then when I enlarged the screen, it showed it at an angle. But I kind of like the way it comes up this way, because it looks like Nibiru falling into the earth. And then you see that it's coming up in verses Joshua 27, which looks like 2017, and 28, which looks like 2018. Of course, Joshua is the name Yeshua in the Hebrew. It's the name Jesus in the Hebrew. And Jesus is the head of the corner. As you can see, when you put in the word head and corner, it comes up 67 times, it says, in 8 verses, which is interesting, because that seems to reflect back to 1967. In 1968, the Strong's number 68 is the word build. But you see that it comes up here in Luke 20:17, where it talks about Jesus being the head of the corner, and Luke 1:27, which again represents the year 2017. But it culminates with verse 18, and I'll go ahead and show you that. And that's actually the scripture that Rhodey 61169 was led to, and I'll show you how he was led to that scripture in a minute. But starting with verse 17, it says, "And he beheld them and said, What is this then that is written? The stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner." Of course, that's Jesus. "Whosoever shall fall upon that stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder." So it culminates in verse 18, which makes 2018. And Jesus was quoting from Psalm 118, verse 22. Again, this is all about DNA. There's 22 autosomes, or 2 sets of 22 autosomes in the human body. But when you go to 1 Peter 2:7, which again makes the numbers 27 and 28, is where it culminates. It says, "Unto you therefore which believe, he is precious. But unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner, a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed." So for those who believe, he's the precious stone, but to the disobedient, he's the stone of stumbling and the rock of offense. Okay, so again, we had the precious onyx, which came up at the very tip of the pyramid on the table that I did on the word Cheops, and it's confirmed in the Bible with the ephod forming a triangle with the onyx as the head of the corner. It's also confirmed in Genesis with the first river, where there was the precious onyx, which was the river Pison. But then according to Exodus 28 verse 17, you had the second gemstone on the high priest's breastplate was the topaz, which is a semi-precious stone. And you can see that right here. It says the first row, there shall be the sardius, the topaz, and the carbuncle. Okay, so that would make the topaz be this stone over here. So if you were to form a triangle this way with the ephod, you would have the topaz as the head of the corner, and if you form a triangle this way, you have the precious onyx. Okay, and so what I was trying to point out in my last video, and this is something I had pointed out before in my previous video on Nibiru, before Trump had made any mention of a wheel, I had pointed out how this word Galilee actually means circuit or wheel, and I had speculated that this would be when Nibiru completes its circuit in 2017-2018, which is this is truly the year 2018. But if you go to the book of Joshua chapter 20, you see that the very last verse is 29, forming what looks like 2019, and this is where it talks about the avenger of blood, which of course would be Jesus in reference to the table. Okay, and I'll show you how the table came up originally. This was actually the very first video I ever did, was on the word Nibiru, and so this is how the table came up initially. I had put in the words Nibiru, star, headstone, came earth, from heaven. This is when I added more terms to the table, which pulled up more of the table, but you can see how it came up straight up and down, and it's interesting how this bottom line comes up, because it says the congregation then came near the heads of fathers, but in terms of the table you see the word came and earth here, then came earth, and you can see the word the head over here. Of course Jesus is the head of the corner, and again this comes up in Joshua 27 and 28 when you put in just the word Nibiru, but then it brought up more of the table when you put in more terms. Okay, so I just want to show you this part. When I put in the word heaven, you can see that at the top it says the avenger of blood, but when you push those letters together it forms the word heaven, and then right underneath that you have the avenger of blood again, so it's like it's forming the letter I with the word Nibiru going straight up and down and being bookended with the avenger of blood and the avenger of blood, but it also makes heaven and heaven, and Nibiru right in the middle straight up and down, which of course is Jesus. Okay, and the importance of the word wheel is that this word Galilee, as I've shown before in the original video that I did about Nibiru, is a form of the word wheel. You can see over here it means circuit or district, and over here this is another form of the same word, which means turning or folding or rolling. This can all refer to DNA. It also is the word for ring, which we had the ring that was recently found, but it's also a form of the word Gilgal, and this is in the book of Joshua chapter 5 when Joshua met with the real Joshua, which is Jesus, and this is when he said to him, "This day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off of you," and I was showing how the word Gilgal actually means wheel. It's a form of the same word, and I've pointed out before how it's a representation of DNA. You see it again in Ezekiel 10 where it talks about the wheel, which represents DNA, and it's the word Galgal, and I've talked about how this is a symmetrical word. It means whirlwind, which represents DNA. It also represents heaven because Ezekiel was taken up in a whirlwind. Okay, and then the next chapter was Joshua 6, which is when the walls came down at the sound of a shout, which is Strong's number 2019. And so I have a lot more to share. I wanted to talk about how this relates to the finding by Rhodey 61169, but I'm running out of time, so I'll have to do that in the next video. But I just want to point out that this is all about DNA. That's what the walls are referring to, that were in a state of reproach in Jeremiah. As you can see, Strong's number is 2346.